That's a doozy, isn't it? So the narrative lectionary continues to invite us to experience the fickle nature of Israel's faithfulness and unfaithfulness. Much like the tick-tock of a clock, back and forth, their devotion and their loyalty swings from side to side, not unlike our own. And somewhere in the middle, between faithfulness and unfaithfulness, we hover, don't we? We hover swaying by the rhythms of our life, the whims of our desires, and our everyday lives. Where will our faith land us? Where will our loyalty to God find us on this day? This is the exact place where Elijah finds his people, swinging between faithfulness and unfaithfulness. How long will you go on limping with two different opinions, he asks. If the Lord is God, follow him. If Baal is God, follow him. But get off the fence, pick a side, stop swinging and swaying, and land somewhere. Of course, Elijah knows good and well where he wants his people to land, but he doesn't just dictate to whom they will be loyal. Instead, he involves them in the decision. He knows that for any kind of loyalty or faith to stick, it has to be chosen freely and not coerced. He gives power to the people. Elijah might have been the first Baptist. Who knows? The Israelite people to this point to begin with. I mean, hasn't the Lord led them out of the land of Egypt through the wilderness into the promised land? Hasn't the Lord given them a king, which is what they want? Didn't they remember that when David was king, that he brought the ark into Jerusalem, that the presence of the Lord was now among them? Well, yes, yes, and yes. How is it then that they are wondering whether or not they should worship the Lord their God? Haven't their parents taught them the stories of their ancestors' faith? Don't they know all of the trials and tribulations of their forefathers and foremothers that have brought them to where they are today? Isn't it obvious from the Ten Commandments that they should only worship the Lord their God? Well, you would think. But it doesn't matter how much we've been told or how much faith has been passed down to us, unless we experience something for ourselves, it doesn't make that big of an impact on our lives, does it? And this is especially the case when there are other options out there, other things to consider in faith, and Baal was another option. You see, we're in the time of King Ahab, around the 9th century BCE. And last week, we saw how the once united monarchy of Israel under David, how it got split again back into the north and the south. Today's story is in the north. King Ahab ruled for 22 years, and he married a Phoenician princess named Jezebel. Jezebel brought her gods into Israel, primarily Baal. And as soon as they got married, Ahab built a temple for Baal in Samaria, the capital city, and then even erected an altar to Baal in the middle of that temple. So Ahab clearly has broken the first commandment, right? You should worship the Lord your God alone and have no other gods before me. Now this has all led to the people going astray, according to Elijah. And you can see how the people are getting mixed messages here. They are confused about whose God they are supposed to follow. So Elijah enters as a prophet. Now, the prophet's role in the times of the kings was essentially to keep the king in check, to make sure the king stayed on track. Kings were charged with seeing that the people were faithful to the covenantal law, meaning to see that the people followed the Ten Commandments. And prophets were then in charge of making sure that the kings were accountable to that they were doing what they were supposed to do. And so here comes the prophet Elijah to keep King Ahab accountable. and he's holding him accountable for the fact that he is promoting the worship of a foreign god. And the whole situation is even more stressful because there's a famine in the land. In fact, the people of Israel are going on year 3 in this famine, and they are desperate for water and for food. And Elijah announces that Ahab's worship of Baal is what caused God to provoke this drought in the land. Not surprisingly, Ahab retorts back, well, no, it's not my fault, it's your fault, Elijah. Right, we're all too familiar with this, the he said, she said, finger-pointing, blame-casting game. That's what's going on here. 2 things that you might be interested to know about this drought and famine. During the drought, King Ahab collected grass for the animals of his royal household, while others, such as the widow at Zarephath and the people in Samaria, are literally starving to death. He used his wealth and power and resources to serve his own family and not his people. Secondly, it's really striking that during this drought, nobody seeks relief from Baal. Baal is the, quote, rider of the clouds, the god of storms and fertility. Baal was quite literally the god of thunder and rain, and in ancient iconography, he has a lightning rod in one hand and drums in the other hand, lightning and thunder. If any god was going to stop this drought, it would be Baal, right? And yet here we are, 3 years into this famine, the people are desperate, and Ahab and Elijah are pointing fingers at one another. So what do you do when you can't agree on who's right and who's wrong? Well, you have a showdown. And no, this isn't a John Wayne Western, but I would not blame you if you thought that it was. This is the showdown at Mount Carmel, and it's a very theatrical scene. Elijah instructs King Ahab to assemble all of the people, all of Israel, and all the prophets of Baal and the prophets of Asherah at Mount Carmel. And to make it even more dramatic, let me just set the stage by saying Elijah gave every advantage to Ahab and the prophets of Baal. First, he gives them home field advantage. This contest is held at his home stadium, Mount Carmel, if you will. This had become a site of worship for Baal in the northern kingdom. Second, Baal's prophets outnumber the Lord 450 to 1. 450 to 1. It doesn't matter if you're Michael Jordan or Mia Hamm or Muhammad Ali or LeBron James or Michael Phelps or Simone Biles or Wayne Gretzky or Serena Williams or Tom Brady. 1 versus 450 is not looking good for that one. Third, Baal was quite literally the god of thunder and rain, and so Elijah gives Baal his weapon of choice. He says that they're going to determine this showdown by who can bring down fire which comes from lightning. Fourth, the animal set to be sacrificed is a bull, which is the symbolic animal of Baal. And fifth, the prophets of Baal get to go first. So essentially Elijah says, okay, Ahab and Baal, you get home field advantage. You get to have 449 more players. You get to use your favorite weapon. You get to have your mascot, and you win the coin toss. Now, I'll just pause right here and say that almost always, home field advantage is a huge asset. But did you watch the World Series the last 2 weeks? As sports writer Roger Sherman said, the 2019 World Series set the record for having the most disappointed fans. 7 times the Astros and the Nationals filled their respective ballparks with hopeful fans that they would see a win, and 7 times 40,000 plus fans walked out of those stadiums disappointed. This was the first World Series in which all 7 games were won by the road team, not the home team. In fact, it was the first best-of-7 series in any major American sport in which the road team won every game. Now, for the most part, across all sports at every level, home teams win more often than they lose. There's all kinds of philosophies and reasons for this. But does this World Series prove then that, quote, home field advantage isn't real? Well, this writer, Sherman, says no. It's just proof that we witnessed a sports miracle. Well, having just witnessed the miracle of the 2019 World Series, we might not be that worried for God and Elijah. But of course, statistically, we should be worried. Why is he giving Baal every opportunity to prove that he is God over and above the Lord God? I mean, the people would have clearly seen this. Elijah makes the whole home field advantage so over the top and obvious that people would have known Baal is clearly going to win this battle. Well, all bets are off, right? This is a 2,900 years in advance preview of the 2019 World Series. Because Baal loses on his home turf. Big time. The prophets are calling on Baal from morning until noon. Baal, answer us. But there's no voice and no answer. They're limping around the altar, trying to get Baal's attention. And Elijah mocks them and says, cry aloud. If Baal is your God, surely he'll come rescue you. Maybe he's meditating. Maybe he's wandered away, which is a Hebrew euphemism for gone to the restroom. Maybe he's on a journey. Maybe he's fallen asleep. Well, the prophets keep crying out again and again. They start cutting themselves with swords and lances, implying quite grotesquely and tragically that Baal is a god that requires self-harm in order for him to respond. The prophets keep all of this up until past midday and until dusk, into the time of the offering of the oblation, the mincha, which means the time of the loyalty offering. But the text says there was no voice, no answer, no response. Baal is a no-show. And with Baal, M-I-A, Elijah makes his move. He calls the people close to them, wanting to involve them in this act of preparing the altar of the Lord. He wants them to be part of asking the Lord to answer them so that they themselves now have an experience of faithfulness from God that they can hold on to in the future. So they prepare this altar, and you heard how they doused it with water again and again and again, which is not an easy feat in the middle of a drought, but that was just to make it that much more significant when the fire came, and fire came it did. Elijah calls on God, O Lord, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel. Notice he doesn't say Jacob, right? He uses that new name that Jacob was given on the banks of the Jabbok River, Israel, which means one who struggles or strives with God. God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known that you are God, and I am your servant, and I've done this bidding on behalf of your people. Answer us, O God, so that the people know that you are God and that you have turned their hearts back to you. Fire rains down, and the showdown is over. God wins. Which means, of course, that the people win. Because that's really the point here. To remind the people of the power of their God and how God is at work in their lives. They fall to their faces and they confess, the Lord indeed is God. The message is clear. No God, no person, no king, no thing, no statue, no idol can hold a candle to the Lord God, who is a God who saves, who delivers, who frees, who brings life, time and time again. God shows God's self to be the one who says, I am who I am, right? My actions speak for myself. I show up, I respond, I'm present, I'm with you. Even when you stray and you're unfaithful, my faith in you remains. You see, our faith isn't about whether or not we're struggling with God, whether or not we have questions or doubts. It's when we bail out on God altogether, when we turn to other gods, little g, around us, because we think those things can help us more, that we get ourselves into trouble. You know what these things are: money, stuff, alcohol, drugs, celebrities, shopping, sports, food, debt, electronics, anything that helps us numb out from life. You see, Elijah was a prophet in the midst of all these competing priorities and loyalties of his day. His people had other gods claiming their attention and energy, and we do too. There is so much claiming our attention and our loyalty. So many competing priorities in our lives. And so, like the saints that we remember today, Elijah calls to us from the past. He calls to us to remember who God is, even in the midst of our dismissiveness and distractedness. Elijah calls us back to devotion of God by inviting us to remember how God has acted in our past and to awaken us to how God is acting in our present. What are the ways in which you dismiss God too easily? What are the things and priorities that distract you away from God too readily? And what are those practices and people who help you become more devoted to God each and every day? I don't know about you, but I dismiss God when I fail to recognize that the good things in my life, the blessings I have, are from God. They're not of my own doing or my own success. I dismiss God when I prefer to rely on my own self-serving wishes and desires to make my way in the world instead of looking to God for guidance and direction. I dismiss God when I fail to see that I have sinned against others in word or deed. And I don't know about you, but I'm distracted from God with my busy schedule, right? By all the things that seem so urgent at the time that take me away from the present moment, from the person in front of me, from the task at hand. I even get distracted by TV shows and by games on my iPhones, by professional goals and family needs and health concerns, and even my own thoughts that can spiral in anxiety. It is so easy to be distracted. But I don't know about you, but the things and people that help me become more devoted to God are the things that invite me to remember that I am beloved and worthy just as I am. Who help me know that the God I worship is not a God who wants self-harm, but rather health and wholeness of body, mind, and soul. And the people and things that help me become more devoted to God are those things that inspire me to remember that God is God and I am not. Beautiful worship services and music and art and communion. The people and things that help me become more devoted to God are those things that involve me in the work of God's kingdom. Reading at Stedman Elementary, advocating for racial justice, learning about the injustices that I am still blind to, listening to the needs of one who walks through our doors and needs food or a shower. And the people and things that help me become more devoted to God are those things that give me the opportunity to invest in the work of God, to put my money where my mouth is. Nothing else that I do helps me realize that God is God and I am not, more than giving my money to the work of God. Because it takes my good intentions and it actually turns them into real, tangible impact beyond what I could ever do on my own. Friends, Elijah helped his people be all in with the Lord God when they were dismissive of the power of God and distracted by the allure of God. He brought them back to singular devotion of God. What about us?